Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You should be able to see a blank screen in front of you, inshaAllah ta'ala. So we're going to begin, and I'm going to begin this lesson, given that we're moving on to another topic, with a question. So I'm going to frame it differently and start with an example to get us to think about this a little bit more, inshaAllah ta'ala. So, say somebody says, a man says to his wife, goes to his wife, and he says to his wife, this phrase here, should you enter the house? Let me move it back a little bit. Might look better if I do that. So, should you enter the house? You are divorced. So there's a fa here. We haven't written it down, but there's a fa here. So he says, should you enter the house? إن دخلت الدار فأنت طالق ثم طالق ثم طالق. Right, so that's the Arabic, which I haven't written down. I'm just going to keep it in English. So someone says, a husband says to his wife, should you enter the house? Then, should you enter the house? You are divorced. So let's put this down. You are divorced. Then, and he uses the particle Thumma, then divorced, and then divorced. And then, so again, he uses the Thumma. Okay. He uses the Thumma again, and then divorced. Okay, so somebody says this. So that's the phrase that we're going to be using to help us unpack today's lesson. And what we're really focusing on is the Thumma. I'll talk about the Thumma in a moment. So the question is, when does divorce happen? How does it happen? What are the implications of Thumma? And through this particular example, inshallah, we will have an appreciation of Thumma, number one, but also the difference of opinion that exists between Imam Abu Hanifa and his two students, who are, of course, referred to as the Sahibin. But before we do any of that, let's explore a little bit of the basics of Thumma. Now, this is obviously the third particle that connects sentences or phrases together, and this is called Thumma. All right, Thumma in Arabic. And Thumma, we say, or we argue, is for lit. We argue it's for what's called lit-tarahi. I'll explain what that means. Okay. Lit-tarahi, which means there's a sort of, if you like, mitigation. Mitigation here means that there is a sense, there is an understanding where you reduce the impact. You reduce the impact. Okay. And how do you do that? By delay. So if you remember the ones that we've been covering before, the first two, there was a sense of immediacy. Here, now it's different. There's an idea of delay. Okay. And allowing, if you like, respite. This is different to the one that we have covered in the previous episodes. So, for example, if I was to say Harun came and Ismail Or Harun came and then Ismail. Harun came, Thumma Ismail. Okay. What that means is that Harun came, but Ismail, there was a slight delay in his coming, or there was a separation between them. So they didn't come together. Okay. Even though they are both coming, they didn't come together. There's a sort of separation in the act itself. And all the jurists agree on this idea. They all agree on this idea. Okay, so that's. There you go. Okay, very simple, nothing complicated. So Harun came and Ismail, Harun and Thumma Ismail, right? So there's a delay and there is a form of separation. They both came, but they both came separately in the act of coming. So this is the principle. But we want to explore this question. Should you enter the house, you are divorced, then divorce, and then divorce. So there's an idea, if you can remember, the first one, the fa, is for immediacy, but the other two, the summa, divorce, and then summa, divorce, they are for tarahi, they are for mitigation. So what happens if somebody was to say this to their wife? And in this particular example, because I want to build on this, in particular example, when the husband says this to the wife, it's worth remembering that he has not consummated the marriage. Okay, that's important in this example because we're going to build on this example a number of cases just to analyze this one. That's very, very important that he hasn't consummated the particular marriage in question. Now, before we move on, we've understood the question, we've understood the mas'ala, we have a tasweer of it, we have an understanding of what is going on. A husband says to his wife that he's not had intercourse with, he hasn't consummated the marriage. He says to her, should you enter the house, you are divorced, then divorce, and then divorce. So what happens here? When is divorce happening? How is it happening? We'll go to that. Before we do that, we've just mentioned that summa is for mitigation, which means it reduces impact by delay and allowing a form of respite. Now, between Imam Abu Hanifa, well, I'm going to put AH here. Imam Abu Hanifa, he takes the position that this occurs in both words and application. Okay, that's his position. His students, the Sahibain, denoted by an S here, they say this only happens on occurrence. There's a difference of opinion on this. So there's a disagreement if the function is to be enforced when the word is uttered or when the content of the words are uttered, basically. Right? So Imam Abu Hanifa goes with words, his two students go with the actual occurrence. So we call this lafz wal-hukm. And they say it only happens in the hukm. Okay, that's the difference. So let's draw another line because we've noticed that there is a difference of opinion that we have to be cognizant of. All right. In fact, I might just draw another line just to separate things out a little bit here. Okay. All right. So nice and tidy. Hopefully you can follow the presentation here. Okay. So let's move on. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, the man says to the wife, should you enter the house, fa, you are divorced, then divorced. So he basically says, in the dar, fa anta, yeah, fa anta talikun, summa طالق, ثم طالق. So there's a fa, there's a thumma, and then a summa that's taking place here. So let's look at Imam Abu Hanifa. Let's look at how this works in real life. Remember, for Imam Abu Hanifa, the words, when they are uttered, are important. Just remember that. So when he says it, the first one, so let's denote the first divorce. Let's do it in different color. Let's call the first divorce here. So divorce number 1, denoted by D1. This is connected to obviously entering the house, right? Should you enter the house? Entering the house. So here, entering the house, the first one. Should you enter the house? Okay. Divorce number 2. Will occur immediately. Right, I'm just going to explain this. And divorce number 3 is void. So entering the house is here, and divorce number 1. Divorce number 2 is you are divorced. Sorry, here, this is number 1. This is number 2, you are divorced. And the third one is, and then divorce. So he's uttered 3 words of divorce. Should you enter the house, you are divorced. So if she enters the house, this is a conditional one, right? The second one is immediate, because there's a thumma, so that happens immediately whether she enters the house or not. And the third one basically is void, because we've mentioned that there's a reason here that they haven't consummated the marriage, and in that case there's only one divorce. Let me explain this. I've just explained it to you in a sentence, but let me go into the details now. Because the first one, the first divorce, is a conditional one, right? If you look at it, it's conditional. Should you do this, this will happen, right? That's a conditional sentence. So there's no immediate divorce here. The second one, where he says Thumma divorce, right? He said it. The application for Imam Abu Hanifa is when you say it. The moment he says it, it happens immediately. Okay. So the second and third divorces are connected to severance. They're connected through Thumma. Now remember, Imam Abu Hanifa considers this to be for a delay or mitigation, or in words. Yeah. It's like the person said, should you enter the house, you are divorced. So he kind of stopped here. And then he said, because Thumma is separate, right? It's not tied to it. It's like he then said, he waited maybe for a second or two, and then he said, you are divorced. So this is like understood as a separate sentence. And because Imam Abu Hanifa holds that Thumma is for words and application, the moment he says it, divorce immediately occurs. The second divorce occurs. Effectively, that's the first divorce, if you like. Yeah. Okay. So it's not connected to the first divorce he uttered, which is conditional. The third one is void, simply because the woman in question has not consummated marriage with her husband, and she's only subject to one divorce. It's a rule. Okay, that's why. And which is irrevocable. Okay. And she doesn't have to wait for her iddah as well. So what really made a divorce happen? The real question is, divorces happen, but which 3 of the utterances have led to it? Well, the first one was a conditional one. Should you enter the house, فَأَنْتِ طَالِقٌ, you'll be divorced. She hasn't entered the house so far, so it doesn't happen. Because we see Thumma, Abu Hanifa sees the application immediately in the words, in the application. As soon as he says you are divorced, the second one here, divorce occurs. So it's this one here which actually leads to the one irrevocable divorce. The second one is void anyway, because there's only one here, because it's they haven't consummated the marriage. Yeah. So the third divorce is void. Very, very simple. It's the application, the words and their application. Let's kind of look at the example from the Sahibain. So the Sahibain, remember, they're talking about occurrence here, when it actually happens, the act. So, if you want to kind of simplify it, here it's to do with word or statement. Here is to do with the act. We'll see this now in an example, their example. Now, what the Sahibain basically say is that all three of these utterances are connected with entering the house. Okay. They say that it happens, they are connected with the occurrence, not with what the husband says. Okay. What does that mean? So once she enters the house, the words are applied. Once she enters the house, the words apply. And what will happen is all three will occur in order and with mitigation. So the first one will be a valid irrevocable divorce. So D1 will be a valid irrevocable divorce. Okay. Because the marriage was not consummated, so the first one, and she's only subject to one divorce. The second one, and if you want the third one, if you like, are void, because she's only one. The reason the Sahibin say that these divorces occur upon the wife entering the house, and not when the words are uttered according to Imam Abu Hanifa, is because they believe that the particle Thumma only mitigates upon the occurrence of the contents of the words. Yeah. So what happens for them is that when he said, should you enter the house, you are divorced, it only happens when the act happens, the act itself happens. So they've tied it to the act. Yeah. They've tied it to the act. Imam Abu Hanifa has tied it to the words. So all three jurists agree that one divorce has occurred, but they disagree on the how it has occurred. So for Imam Abu Hanifa, it's the second one. Yeah, when the words were said, and for the Sahibain, it's number one, when the condition is actually triggered by the wife entering. She's entered, right? The act of entering. For Imam Abu Hanifa, it's the act of words. Yeah. So as a consequence, that's how it works. I hope that makes sense. A small difference, but still nonetheless a useful one to be aware of. So let me draw another line because I want to explore something else with you. I don't want that to happen. Okay, so let's draw a line under that one. Just following the same. Okay, maybe not into that. Maybe you rub this out. Oh. It's tidy. Too big. There you go. Okay, bring the ruler back. All right, so we can pause there for a second. Okay, so I'm just following the reasoning of Imam Abu Hanifa and the Sahibain the Sahibain tie the Thumma to the occurrence. So for them, as soon as she enters the house, one irrevocable divorce, which is what she's entitled to here, will take place the moment she enters the house. So it actually happens when she enters the house. Whereas with Abu Hanifa, there's none of that. As soon as he says it, right, it immediately occurs. And because the Summa is separate, when he said you are divorced here, right, immediately one irrevocable divorce happens. For Sahibain, because it's upon the hukam, the acting, as soon as she enters the house, the one irrevocable divorce will happen then. Okay, I think that's clear, because Sahibin don't look at the content of the words per se, but actually they look at the occurrence of it. All right, so let's move on, inshallah ta'ala, with a bit more detail. Let me give you another example. Say, for example, example number 2. Say, for example, which can highlight this different opinion, is if the husband didn't use the conditional part of the sentence, and he just basically said, you are divorced, then divorce, and then divorce if you enter the house, right? So if he left the condition to the end, so he said basically, you are divorced, with a summa, of course, right? You are, so there's a summa here. You are divorced. Sorry. So he said, you are divorced, and then he says then, which is the summa, then divorced. Okay. And then he said, and then divorced. So again, a summa again. Yeah. So you are divorced, then summa divorced, then divorced, and then divorce if you enter the house. Then if so, he put a condition at the end. If you enter the house, just fit it on there. Let me just draw a ruler. So let's look at this one. This is the same example, but we put the condition at the end. Oh, yeah, no, that wasn't meant to happen. Okay. So let's look at this one. So in this example, the net result is that one divorce will occur. Now, what does Imam Abu Hanifa say? So let's stick with Imam Abu Hanifa says, right? So which one is it? So Imam Abu Hanifa says, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that it will be the first one, this one here, divorce number 1, according to Imam Abu Hanifa. And it will be immediate because of his principle, right? The words are applicable immediately. Divorce 2, which is the Thumma, right? Which is for mitigation, tarahi, which is for delay in both words and occurrence, according to him. So the husband basically said, you are divorced. Then he became silent. And then he added, you are divorced. And he became silent. And then he said, you are divorced if you enter the house. And then became silent. Yeah. So this first one will occur immediately because it is unconnected. Remember? This is unconnected to the condition and to the second and third divorce. It's completely separate. He just said you are divorced. Yeah. And the second and third divorces, of course, the second floor will just be void according to him. Because we're sticking with the example that they haven't consummated the marriage. Straightforward, and that's how it works. Now look at the Sahibi. Remember, they say it's jihad. Now look at this one. According to them, again, they say the first divorce will occur, but it will be only when the condition is met, when she enters the house. And it goes back to the act. Here in this case, it's entering. Okay. So The first divorce will happen. You are divorced if you enter the house. Because they're not considering what Imam Abu Hanifa does in the words. Okay? They factor in the content or the occurrence of the content of the words. So they're all connected to the condition. So the first divorce will occur upon entering the house, and the latter two and three, are of course number 2 and number 3 are void. Yeah, because she's only subject to one divorce. Nice and simple. Just give you some more examples there. What if? Let's get into more detail, and I might not have space to write this, but let's see. Let's use a completely different example. Let's use the same example actually, but let's build on it. Yeah. Now, all the examples we've been covering so far have been where the husband has consummated the marriage. Yeah. What if it's been consummated? Now they will have 3 divorces. Yeah. In the same scenario. But the only difference is that they've consummated, which means there's 3 divorces. Yeah. So let's go back to the first example. If he said, if you enter the house, you are divorced, then divorced, and then divorced, right? But now the scenario is what? That they've consummated the marriage. And you just follow the reasoning of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa will say that the first one, should you enter the house, right? As you follow his principle, will be deferred. The first one will be deferred as before to entering the house, which is the same, right? Because he's made it conditional. The second one, I'll just put it here to save space. The second one and the third one will be immediate because the wording and there's 3 divorces. Right? So the particle Thumma has mitigated and separated the last 2 from the condition. So they're separate from it now. They're separate. Thumma is separate. And the other 2 is like he said, you are divorced, then you are divorced. He's given a 2. Okay. So she will be given 2 divorces. Okay. Of course, if she then enters the house, that would be the 3rd divorce. Very, very simple. Nothing difficult there. Yeah. That's Imam Abu Hanifa. And you can work out Sahibin's position from there as well. If we took the same scenario and we just reversed it and we said, like this one here, 2 here, but this is consummated now, of course. We're just using the same example, right? And then he said to her, you are divorced. Let me see if I can do something different. Different work. Let's try. If he says, you are divorced, that's too big. Just smaller. He says, you are divorced, then you are divorced, then you are divorced, and then you are divorced if you enter the house. Same one, but this time it's the same thing that is to do with a scenario or a situation where it's free because they've consummated the marriage. Okay. So the first and second divorce will occur immediately. Yeah. And the third one will be deferred until she enters. Because the Thumma is causing the sentence to mitigate and separate. The first and second part is not connected to the condition. And the issue, and there's an issue of 2 separate divorces. They will occur immediately. Very, very straightforward. Yeah. The final one is, of course, connected to a condition. Only if the wife enters the house. This according to Abu Hanifa. Of course, the Sahibain, as you know, they say that the particle Thumma doesn't allow for mitigation in the words, but will only allow it when the event occurs. So all three divorces are actually deferred. All three are deferred when she enters the house. This is the Sahibin position. So they are consistent. Imam Abu Hanifa is consistent. Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf are consistent. All they're saying is that divorce occurs, but what they're saying is how does it occur? Imam Abu Hanifa says it's in the utterance. The Sahibin say it's in the act. That's all you need to know. Okay. I'll stop there, inshallah ta'ala. And if anybody has any questions, can perhaps take them. Watch it again, inshallah, it'll become clear for you. Okay. All right, beautiful. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. If anybody has any questions, of course, you can reach out to me. I hope you found that useful. Inshallah, I will see you, if Allah wills, next week. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم.